Video we're going to go over something called set driven keys, which are typically used for a little bit of complex movements. So basically I've already set one up on this control. If you need to look at controls, you can go back to my lesson 14. I go over some controls and some constraints. Basically what it does is this little flying thing that I got going on here will sit on its tail, but then when it's going to take off, the fans will start going and the tail moves up when I move the control up, and you can see that when it's about halfway up, the bottom part of the fin turns as well. So there's two things going on here. That's what I use the set driven key for. First thing you need to know, or that's helpful, is these controls that I'm making, I am making in Illustrator. So if you have Adobe Illustrator, you can use those. Otherwise you can just draw simple ones in Maya. If you want to import them from Illustrator, here I have an arrow that I've just drawn with the pen tool in Illustrator. So I'm going to go save as, and I'm going to save it as double arrow in a folder where I can find it to import it. I'll hit save as. In this case I'm overwriting a previous version of it. The important part is in the version drop-down box, you're going to want to go to Illustrator 8 or earlier. For whatever reason, it's problematic if you try and save it as the newest version. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. No big deal, I can close Illustrator. So we're going to jump back into Maya, go down to File and Import. I'm going to navigate to that double arrow that I just saved. Hit Import. Now, I'm going to go into my outliner, and it actually imported some extra garbage that I don't need. What I really need, I can get rid of where it says Transform 2. I can delete that because what I really need is Curve 3. So you may have to go through your outliner and just sort of find the one you need. And depending where it imports it, you may want to center your pivot as well. So go ahead and do that. We're going to move it kind of into place, and I'm just going to scale it down so it's more user friendly. Alright, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to actually need my outliner here for this a little bit. I'm going to set the limit information on this. So first I'm going to go up to, with my arrow selected, I'm going to go up to Modify, and I'm going to go Freeze Transformations. So if you look in the channel box, it resets all those to 0. I'm going to hit Control or Command A to open up my attribute editor, and I'm going to click on Curve 3, that first tab for this. Now you're going to want to open up Limit Information, and you're going to make sure that you're on Translate. And so when I move this arrow up and down, that's when it's going to move my tail fin. See, so I'm going to limit my arrows, translate Y limit, and minimum and maximum. So I can go down to -1, I can go up to +1. It's important to know what your limits are. So now that I have that selected, right now my tail fin is in 2 parts, but it's in a group. So in my outliner, you can see I pasted these all because I stole them from another one of my files. But I'm going to select the tail set group, which is both of those, where I've already set the pivot on this one to right around where this tail is going to rotate, and I've set the pivot on the bottom part of the tail around where it's going to rotate. So I'm going to select my group here, and what I'm going to do, I've moved into Maya 2011. I believe in my 8.5 you could just get to this with a right-click menu, but I'm going to go back to my channel box, and I know that my Rotate X is the one I'm going to rotate this group around. So I'm going to first kill this because we already have that, or that's what we're setting up. So my Rotate X, I think you used to be able to just right-click on it, but now you have to control right-click in 2011. I'm going to control right-click on the attribute I'm going to edit or set the driven key on, which is the Rotate X. I'm going to go down to Set Driven Key, which opens up your Set Driven Key window. Whatever you had selected will be in the driven, And then what you want to do, so my pasted tail set, I'm going to set a driven key for the rotate X. Now what do you want to drive that attribute? I'm going to select my control, which I have already moved down to -1. Okay, I've moved it down as far as it will go. I'm going to go to load driver. This is what's going to drive that rotation. And by moving my arrow in the Y direction, my translate Y is going to be the driver. So now I'm all set. This is where the control is going to start, and that's where the tail is going to start. So I can set a key. You just hit key. Alright, and then what you do, I've keyed the one extreme, so the very beginning. Now I want to key what it's going to look like at the very end. I'm going to move my arrow all the way up. I'm going to select my pasted tail set. I'm going to rotate that into the position that it's going to be in, so about there, and I'm going to key that. So if you look at this now, you select this control and move it, you can see the tail rotates up just a little bit, okay, to where that should be. Now I want this bottom section of tail right here, I want this to start rotating when this part of the tail is about halfway up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my arrow. I know that my arrow, the translate goes from -1 all the way up to a +1. I did that so in my head I know that when this arrow is at translate 0, the arrow is halfway up. So I'm going to go ahead, and since my arrow control is still the driver, that's all good in my set driven key window as the driver. I'm going to select this bottom end of the tail and select load driven button. So I hit that, and you can see that, let's see, load driven. So you can see that it changes from pasted tail set to pasted tail fin. And then I know that this is going to be the rotate X again that I'm driving. So this is how the bottom part of the tail is going to start. So I'm going to key that. Fantastic. I'm going to go to my arrow, move it the rest of the way up, and then I'm going to rotate my tail fin the rest of the way up where I want it to end. So we set a key at the very beginning of the rotation. Now we set a key at the very end of the rotation. Now, if all goes to plan, what we should see when I move this arrow up and down, you can see that the tail fin starts pointing that way, and then it just rotates with the rest of the tail fin until I get that arrow to about 0. Now if you watch this tail fin, you can see that my control is at 0. You watch this tail fin, that's when it starts rotating. Okay, so that's pretty much it for set driven keys. You can pretty much use any attribute on a control to control any attribute on here on the actual tail fin. So I know that was a little bit quick, but this is one application for it. If I open up the file that I was originally working on for this, then you can kind of see that I've used a bunch of them. Oh, that's definitely the wrong one. I've used a bunch of different set driven keys for this. Let's see, I want this one. Don't save. It's opening. Okay, so I've got basically a control box here. So when I move this one, that will start the fans. And the higher that this one is up, the faster the fans will spin. So I've got that one. I've got the tail fin, okay, which does what I just showed you. And then I've got this one in the middle, which will drop rocket boxes out of the plane itself. So you can use multiple controls, but this makes it so much easier to do the movement, especially when it takes off, than if I were to just try and animate it on its own. So if you have any questions, go ahead and leave me a comment, and I will try and answer them on that one. And good luck with the set driven keys.